Payne was not a stranger to Major Jack's apex Thorne. It was a roommate he had been trying to evict for 20 years. But today, the roommate was tearing down the walls. Jack stood in the sliding glass entryway of the Capital City Military Medical Center, a monolith of concrete and glass that promised healing but mostly delivered bureaucracy. At 42, Jax looked like a weapon that had been left out in the rain, hard, dangerous, but showing signs of rust. He wore civilian clothes that fit poorly over his frame. A tight gray t-shirt straining against biceps built by dragging sleds through the Hindu Kush, and cargo pants that concealed the scar tissue mapping his legs. He was the commanding officer of Task Force 77, a unit so classified their budget was buried under agricultural subsidies. He was a Tier 1 operator who had stared down warlords and walked away. But right now, a microscopic piece of jagged steel, a souvenir from a breaching charge in Syria 3 years ago, was migrating near his spine. He didn't walk to the reception desk. He marched, his left leg dragging slightly, a hitch in his giddy-up that made his teeth grind. The lobby was a chaotic sea of suffering. Crying babies, veterans in wheelchairs staring at the floor, and the incessant beep of ticket machines. Jax bypassed the ticket machine and went straight to the desk. "I need ortho," Jax growled. His voice was gravel tumbling in a dryer. "Now." The receptionist, a young man who looked like he hadn't started shaving yet, blinked behind thick glasses. "Sir, do you have an appointment? The wait time for walk-ins is currently 4 hours. "I don't have 4 hours." Jax leaned over the counter. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I have a foreign object in my L4 vertebrae that feels like it's trying to cut my spinal cord. Get me Colonel Vance." "He knows me." "Colonel Vance is in surgery, sir," the receptionist squeaked. I can put you in the queue for the triage nurse." Jax slammed his hand on the counter, not hard enough to break it, but loud enough to silence the nearby waiting area. "I don't need a nurse. I need a surgeon. I am not some weekend warrior with a sprained ankle." "Major Thorne." The voice came from the side door. It was soft, maternal, the kind of voice that asked if you wanted extra marshmallows in your cocoa. Jax turned. Standing there was a woman who looked decidedly unmilitary. Elena Rossi was 44, but the harsh fluorescent lighting made her look older. She was short and curvy, with hips that spoke of childbirth rather than combat. Her scrubs were a cheerful, ridiculous pattern of cartoon puppies. Her dark hair was held back in a messy clip, escaping in frizzy tendrils around a face devoid of makeup. She wore pink Crocs. She looked like a kindergarten teacher. She looked like the woman who brings potato salad to the church potluck. "I'm Elena," she said, offering a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm the senior intake nurse. If you'll come with me, I can start your vitals." Jax looked at her, then looked over her shoulder, expecting the real medical professional to step out. No one did. "You've got to be kidding me," Jax muttered, the pain in his back spiking into a white-hot lance. "I asked for a doctor. I didn't ask for the lunch lady." The insult hung in the air, heavy and ugly. The young receptionist gasped. Elena didn't flinch. Her smile didn't falter, but the temperature in her hazel eyes dropped to absolute zero. She adjusted the stethoscope around her neck. "The lunch lady is the only thing standing between you and a paralyzed left leg, Major," she said. Her voice was still soft, but there was a steel rod running through it now. "You're standing with a pelvic tilt favoring your right side. You're sweating, despite the AC being set to 68 degrees. And your pupils are dilated to the size of dinner plates. You are in grade 9 agony. Now, you can stand here and insult my footwear, or you can come to Bay 4 and let me keep you from falling on your face." Jax narrowed his eyes. "I don't let civilians touch me. You don't know what I've got inside me. You're used to treating heavy smokers and changing bedpans. And you're used to giving orders and having people jump," Elena countered, stepping aside and holding the door open. "But in this hospital, Major, my house, my rules. You want Vance? You survive long enough to see him. That starts with me." Jax weighed his options. The fire in his spine was beginning to blur his vision. He grunted, a sound of pure frustration, and limped past her into the triage room. The room was sterile and cold. Jax sat on the edge of the exam bed, refusing to lie down. Elena moved with a deceptive slowness. She wasn't rushing, yet things were happening instantly. The blood pressure cuff was on. The thermometer was in. BP is 150/95, she noted, glancing at the monitor. Pain-driven. History. Classified. Jax snapped. Elena sighed, typing on the computer. It's a hospital, Major, not an interrogation. I can see the scar tissue on your neck. I assume you've taken blast damage. The shrapnel in your back? Is it magnetic? No. High-grade titanium alloy. Debris from a drone casing. And it moved. She finished for him. She walked over and stood in front of him. Look at me. Jax glared at her. What? You're graying out, she said matter-of-factly. The blood is leaving your face. You feel nauseous. I feel like punching something. That's the adrenaline trying to compensate for the shock, she said, reaching for his wrist. Her fingers were cool, her grip surprisingly firm. She found his pulse instantly. Thready. You're in trouble, Major. I told you, he hissed, pulling his arm away. Get me. Corpseman. Someone who has seen a combat wound. Someone who knows the difference between a boo-boo and a kill shot. Elena stood still. For a second, she looked tired. Not physically tired, but soul-tired. Major, I can start in 4, give you Toradol for the inflammation, and stabilize you until Vance gets out. Or you can sit in the lobby and wait for a real soldier to help you while your spinal column gets severed. I'll wait, Jax said, his pride doing the talking while his body screamed in protest. He stood up. I'm going to the waiting room. If Vance isn't here in 10 minutes, I'm calling the general. He turned his back on her and marched out. It took exactly 12 minutes for Jax Thorne's body to stage a mutiny. He was pacing the waiting room, ignoring the terrified looks of the civilians around him. He was trying to breathe through the pain, using the box breathing techniques he'd learned at selection. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It wasn't working. The pain wasn't just in his back anymore. It was a rhythmic thumping in his abdomen. A deep, sickening pulse that matched his heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. His vision tunneled. The sounds of the hospital, the ringing phones, the crying babies, stretched and warped like a slow-motion record. He reached for the back of a chair to steady himself, but his hand missed. The floor rushed up to meet him. Major! The shout was distant. Jax hit the linoleum hard, but he didn't feel the impact. He felt cold, so incredibly cold. He tried to push himself up, but his arms were like wet noodles. He rolled onto his back, staring up at the acoustic ceiling tiles. A face appeared above him. It wasn't a doctor. It was the lunch lady. But Elena didn't look like a lunch lady anymore. The soft, maternal mask was gone. In its place was a face of stone, eyes scanning him with the precision of a predator drone. He's crashing, Elena shouted, but she wasn't screaming in panic. She was barking orders. Code blue in the lobby. Get a gurney. Respiratory. Get down here. She dropped to her knees beside him. She didn't check his pulse at the wrist. Her hands flew to his neck, then to his abdomen. She pressed down on his stomach. Jax groaned, a guttural sound. Rigid distension, she muttered. It's not the spine. It's the vessel. She leaned close to his face. Major! Jax, can you hear me? Cold. Jax whispered. So cold. You've blown a gasket, she said, her voice cutting through the fog. The shrapnel didn't just hit the nerve. It nicked the descending aorta or the iliac. You're bleeding out internally. 2 orderlies rushed up with a stretcher. On my count, Elena commanded. 1, 2, lift. They hoisted 220 pounds of dead weight onto the gurney. Jax felt the world swaying. He saw Elena running beside the gurney, one hand on his shoulder, the other holding a portable oxygen mask to his face. Stay with me, tough guy, she said. Don't you dare die on me in the lobby. They burst into the trauma bay like a breaching team taking a room. Trauma 1. Elena yelled. We need massive transfusion protocol. 2 units ONEG. Uncross-matched. Now. A young resident physician, Dr. Prentice, looked up from a clipboard. He was fresh out of med school, wearing a pristine white coat and an expression of annoyance. Nurse Rossi? I didn't authorize a code blue. Who is this? Major Jax Thorne, Elena snapped, ripping Jax's shirt open, buttons flying. Suspected abdominal aortic rupture secondary to shrapnel migration. He's hypovolemic. BP is crashing. Dr. Prentice stepped forward, looking at the monitors. Whoa, slow down, Elena. Let's get a CT scan first. We can't just assume. He doesn't have time for a CT, Elena shouted, grabbing a pair of trauma shears and cutting Jax's pants off. Look at the distension. Look at the pressure. 60/40 and dropping. If you put him in the scanner, he's dead in the tube. I am the physician here, Prentice yelled, his voice cracking. You are a nurse. Step back. We will stabilize with fluids and transport to imaging. The monitor began to scream. A flat, high-pitched tone. Beep. He's coded. Prentice panicked. Start compressions. Get the crash cart. Compressions won't work. Elena grabbed Prentice by the lapels of his white coat and physically shoved him, against the wall. There's no blood to pump. The tank is empty. We have to plug the hole. You're crazy, Prentice stammered. Security. Elena ignored him. She turned to the crash cart. She didn't grab the defibrillator. She grabbed a specialized, dusty kit from the bottom shelf. The Reboa kit. Resuscitative endovascular balloon occlusion of the aorta. It was a procedure reserved for vascular surgeons. It involved threading a catheter up the femoral artery into the aorta and inflating a balloon to stop blood flow to the lower body, preserving the heart and brain. It was high risk, high skill, and absolutely forbidden for a nurse to perform. Nurse Rossi, put that down, Prentice screamed. That is outside your scope of practice. You will lose your license. You will go to jail. Elena looked at Jax's gray face. She looked at the flat line on the monitor. She didn't see the sterile hospital room. For a split second, the walls dissolved. She was back in a dusty tent in the Karangal Valley. The smell of burning diesel and copper blood filled her nose. The sound of mortars walking in. A 19-year-old kid bleeding out in her hands. Not again, she thought. Not this one. Scope of practice be damned, she whispered. She kicked the brake off the cart. I'm scrubbing in. If you want to help, prep his right groin. If not, get the hell out of my trauma bay. Prentice froze. The other nurses, who had worked with Elena for years, didn't hesitate. They knew something Prentice didn't. They moved to support her. Prep complete, a nurse named Sarah said, handing Elena the ultrasound probe. Elena moved with the speed of a striking cobra. There was no hesitation, no lunch lady clumsiness. She located the femoral artery with the ultrasound in 3 seconds. Needle, she commanded. She punctured the skin. A flash of dark blood. Wire. She threaded the guide wire up Jax's leg, blind, visualizing the anatomy in her mind's eye. She had done this 100 times in the back of a shaking Chinook helicopter under night vision goggles. Doing it in a well-lit room was a luxury. She's killing him, Prentice was shouting into his phone. Get security. Get the director. Catheter, Elena said, her voice calm, icy. She slid the device over the wire. She measured the length. Zone 1, just above the diaphragm. Inflating balloon. She pushed the plunger. Everyone stared at the monitor. The flat line persisted for 1 second, 2 seconds, then a blip, then thump-thump. Return of spontaneous circulation, Sarah breathed. BP is rising, 80/50, 90/60. The balloon had plugged the dam. The blood was staying in Jax's heart and brain. Elena exhaled. A long, shaky breath. She taped the line down. Her hands were covered in Jax's blood. The doors burst open. Security guards rushed in, followed by the hospital director, a suit-wearing bureaucrat named Dr. Sterling, no relation to the Marine, and finally Colonel Vance, the orthopedic surgeon. "What is the meaning of this?" Director Sterling roared. Colonel Vance looked at the monitor, then at the Reboa catheter sticking out of Jax's leg, then at Elena. "Who placed the Reboa?" Vance asked, stunned. "I did," Elena said, stepping back, stripping off her bloody gloves. "You?" The director turned purple. "A nurse? You performed an invasive endovascular procedure." "Patient was exsanguinating," Elena said, her voice trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "Dr. Prentice ordered a CT scan. Patient would have died in transit." "You are fired," the director spat. "Get her out of here. I want her credential pulled immediately. This is assault. This is gross negligence." Elena didn't argue. She looked at Jax, whose heart was beating a steady rhythm on the screen. He was alive. She nodded once, grabbed her purse from the counter, and walked out past the security guards. She kept her head high, but as she reached the hallway, she let the tears fall. Jax woke up 2 days later in the ICU. He felt like he had been run over by a tank, then backed over again to make sure. But he was alive. He could feel his toes. Colonel Vance was standing at the foot of the bed, reading a chart. "Welcome back, Sleeping Beauty," Vance said. "Vance?" Jax rasped. His throat felt like sandpaper. "What happened?" "I was in the lobby. Then lights out." "You blew your aorta, Jax. That shrapnel you were ignoring sliced right through the artery wall. You bled out into your abdomen. You technically died for about 40 seconds. Jax blinked. "You fixed me?" "I fixed the tear," Vance said, putting the chart down. "But I didn't save your life. By the time I got to the room, someone had already placed a Reboa balloon and stabilized your pressure. If they hadn't done that, you'd be in the morgue." "Who?" Jax asked. "Prentice? That kid resident." Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Prentice? No. Prentice was trying to send you to a CT scan which would have killed you. The person who saved you was the intake nurse, Elena Rossi." Jax froze. The image of the woman in the puppy scrubs came back to him. The woman he had called a lunch lady. The woman he had sneered at. "The civilian?" Jax asked. "Civilian," Vance mused. "That's a funny word. You know, after the incident, the director fired her. On the spot. For practicing medicine without a license. They're holding a disciplinary hearing tomorrow to formalize stripping her nursing credentials. They might even press criminal charges." "They fired her?" Jax tried to sit up, wincing as his abdominal staples pulled. "For saving my life?" "She broke protocol, Jax. Big time. Nurses don't do surgery." Vance paused, looking at Jax with a knowing look. "But here's the thing. Prentice was bragging about how he tried to stop her. He said she moved like a machine. Said she put a line in blind in under 10 seconds. I got curious." Vance tossed a manila folder onto Jax's bed. "I pulled her personnel file. Not the hospital one. The real one. Turns out, before she was Nurse Rossi, she had a different name." Jax opened the folder. The photo inside was grainy, black and white. It showed a younger Elena, wearing a flight suit, standing next to a scorched Pave Hawk helicopter. She wasn't smiling. She was covered in grime, holding an M4 carbine in one hand and a blood bag in the other. Jax read the service record. His eyes widened. Rank: Major, Ret. USAF Pararescue/JSOC Medical Attachment. Call sign Valkyrie. Deployments: Afghanistan, Op Enduring Freedom, Iraq, Syria, Somalia. Awards: Air Force Cross, 2 Purple Hearts, Silver Star. Jax read the citation for the Silver Star. Despite sustaining shrapnel wounds to the leg, Captain Rossi continued to triage and treat 12 critically wounded operators during a 14-hour firefight in the Pesh Valley, performing 3 field amputations and maintaining a casualty collection point while under direct mortar fire. Jax closed the folder. His hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from rage. "She was a PJ," Jax whispered. "She was JSOC. She was the best combat medic the Air Force ever had," Vance corrected. She retired 5 years ago. Burnt out. Wanted a quiet life. She didn't tell anyone here. She just wanted to be a nurse. Jax thought about what he had said to her. I don't let civilians touch me. You're used to changing bedpans. He felt a shame so deep it burned hotter than the incision in his gut. Where is this hearing? Jax asked, his voice low and dangerous. Administration wing. Tomorrow. 0900. Vance said. But you're bedridden, Jax. You can't go. Jax looked at Vance. The predator was back in his eyes. Get me a wheelchair, Vance. And get me my dress blues. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and hypocrisy. Elena sat at the end of a long mahogany table. She wasn't wearing scrubs today. She wore a simple navy blazer and slacks. She looked small. Across from her sat the tribunal, Director Sterling, the chief of legal, and the head of nursing. They looked like vultures circling a wounded animal. Ms. Rossi, Director Sterling began, adjusting his expensive glasses. The facts are not in dispute. You utilized a restricted medical device. You physically assaulted a resident physician. You endangered the life of a patient. I saved the life of a patient, Elena said quietly. That is speculation. The lawyer cut in. We have to look at liability. If you had ruptured his aorta, this hospital would be sued for millions. This is cowboy medicine. It has no place in a civilized institution. Major Thorne was dead, Elena said, her voice gaining a little strength. He had no pulse. Liability doesn't apply to a corpse. Regardless, the director sighed, looking bored. We have no choice but to terminate your employment and report this incident to the state nursing board. We will be recommending the permanent revocation of your license. Elena looked down at her hands. She had spent 20 years holding the hands of dying boys in the dirt. She had washed the blood out of her hair in rivers. She had come here to find peace, to still serve, but without the gunfire. And now, a man in a suit who had never missed a meal was ending her career because she refused to let a man die. Is there anything you wish to say? The director asked. Elena opened her mouth, but a loud crash interrupted her. The double doors at the back of the room flew open. Rolling into the room was a high-tech motorized wheelchair, and sitting in it was Major Jax Thorne. He looked like death warmed over. His face was pale, sweat beaded on his forehead, and 4 lines trailed behind him on a pole attached to the chair. But he was wearing his Army service uniform. The dark blue coat was pressed. The gold epaulets shone. And on his chest was a fruit salad of ribbons that would make a dictator jealous. Major Thorne. The director stood up, flustered. You should be in the ICU. I'm in a meeting, Jax rumbled. He steered the chair right up to the table, positioning himself next to Elena. He didn't look at the director. He looked at Elena. Morning lunch lady, he said. Elena looked at him, shock registering on her face. You idiot. You're going to rip your stitches. Worth it, Jax grunted. He turned his chair to face the tribunal. I hear you're firing my medic. This is a closed hearing, Major, the lawyer said. And Ms. Rossi is not a medic. She is a nurse who violated. Shut up, Jax said. He didn't shout. He just said it with the authority of a man who commanded men who killed people for a living. The lawyer shut up. Jax reached into his tunic pocket. It was a struggle. He grimaced, his knuckles turning white, but he pulled out a piece of paper. It was the EKG strip from the trauma bay. Time of death, 1402. Jax read. Time of resurrection, 1403. That's what this piece of paper says. Says I was dead. And then I wasn't. He slid the paper down the table. You call it gross negligence, Jax said, his voice rising. I call it a Tier 1 field intervention. She is a civilian, the director argued, slamming his hand on the table. She doesn't have the training. Jax laughed. It was a terrifying sound. Show them, Elena, Jax said softly. Elena shook her head. Jax, no. It doesn't matter. It matters, Jax insisted. Show them. That's an order, Major. The use of the rank sucked the air out of the room. The director froze. Major. Jax looked at Elena. Roll up your sleeve, Valkyrie. Elena hesitated. Then slowly, she stood up. She took off her blazer. She unbuttoned the cuff of her white blouse and rolled up the left sleeve. The skin of her forearm was a map of violence. There were burn scars, shiny and jagged. But amidst the scars was a tattoo. It wasn't a butterfly. It was the insignia of the pararescue jumpers, the angel wrapping its arms around the earth. And below it, the skull and crossed arrows of Task Force 121. And the words, that others may live. She isn't just a nurse, Jax announced to the room. This is Major Elena Rossi, USAF, retired. She was the lead medical specialist for the Joint Special Operations Command. She has performed more field surgeries in the back of a burning Humvee than this entire hospital performs in a year. Jax pointed a finger at the director. I acted like an ass in your lobby. I judged her by her shoes and her gender. I was wrong. But you're judging a war hero because she didn't fill out the right form while saving a battalion commander's life. The director was pale. He looked at the scars on Elena's arm. He looked at the medals on Jax's chest. If you fire her, Jax continued, leaning forward, I will have every veteran in this city picketing your front lawn by noon. I will go on CNN. I will tell the world that Capital City Medical would rather let a soldier die than let a hero break a rule. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the air conditioner and the rhythmic beep of Jax's portable heart monitor. The director looked at his lawyer. The lawyer shook his head frantically. Do not fight this, the sheikh said. The director cleared his throat. He sat down. It appears, the director stammered, that there were extenuating circumstances. Given the major's prior qualifications, we can perhaps classify this as a consulting specialist intervention under the Good Samaritan Act. Perhaps, Jax said dryly. We will suspend the termination, the director said, wiping sweat from his upper lip. Ms. Rossi may return to duty, with a formal warning regarding protocol. No, Jax said. Excuse me? No warning, Jax said. A commendation for life-saving action under pressure. The director sighed. He looked defeated. Fine. A commendation. Are we done? We're done, Jax said. Elena pushed Jax's wheelchair back toward the elevator. They didn't speak until the doors closed, sealing them in a steel box. Elena leaned her head against the wall of the elevator. You're a stubborn son of a bitch, you know that? I've been told, Jax said. He looked up at her. Valkyrie, huh? I heard stories about you. In Kandahar, they said there was a PJ who ran into a minefield to get a pilot. They said she walked on water. Just mud and blood, Major, she said softly. Just doing the job. Why didn't you say anything? Jax asked. In the lobby, when I was treating you like garbage. Elena shrugged. Because I'm not that person anymore. I put that uniform away. I just wanted to help people without the dying part. Well, Jax said, patting his leg where the catheter had been. You failed at the no dying part. But you succeeded at the help part. The elevator dinged. They were back on the ICU floor. Jax stopped the chair before she could wheel him out. He turned it around to face her. He looked at her pink Crocs. He looked at her messy hair. He looked at the tired lines around her eyes. I owe you my life, Elena, he said. And I owe you an apology. I forgot that warriors don't always look like me. Elena smiled. This time it reached her eyes. It was a beautiful, genuine smile. We're square, Jax. But if you ever call me lunch lady again, I'll put a catheter in a place you really won't like. Jax chuckled, wincing at the pain. He straightened his back as much as he could. He looked her dead in the eye. Slowly, sharply, Major Jax Thorne raised his hand to his brow. He rendered a perfect, crisp salute. Not to a subordinate, but to a superior. Elena froze. Tears welled up again, but she blinked them back. She straightened her posture, the exhaustion falling away for a brief moment. She didn't salute back. She was a civilian now. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand over his. Welcome home, Apex, she whispered. Good to be back, he said. Jax spun the chair around. Now, put me back in bed before Vance realizes I stole his chair. And Elena. Yeah. Next time I come in, I'm wearing pink Crocs. They look comfortable. Elena laughed. The sound echoed down the sterile hallway, louder than the beeping machines, louder than the bureaucracy. It was the sound of a battle won.